Welcome. Welcome to episode 27 of the From the Pure Land podcast. I'm Mel Pine. You can find my regular blog on melpine, MELPINE, .substack.com. And I post something roughly 4 times a week there. I try to do a podcast once a week, and sometimes it's an interview. I'm really excited about today's because I'm excited about Tara Mandala. I'm kind of new to it. That's the worldwide organization created by Lama Sultan Alioni, who's American born, but one of that generation, my generation, but I didn't have the guts to go to Asia. Uh, Part of the generation that went to Asia very early, around 1970, and came back and bring the teachings of the East to us. Today's guests are the executive director of Tara Mandala, Katie Alioni, and a senior teacher, Chergal Lisa Erickson. Why don't I ask? I didn't really introduce either of you more than that. Katie, would you like to say a few words of introduction?
Sure. Good morning, Mel, and good morning, Lisa. It's great to be here and excited to be part of kind of the foundation of this great sharing of your journey, Mel, and the path of Buddhism. I am the executive director at Mandala again. I was the director for 4 years in my early to mid 30s, when Lama Sultram and I and David Petit and Lama Gyurme and everybody built the temple that is at Mandala. And then I was in Asia for 7 years in Kathmandu studying Buddhism, and then returned back to Colorado. That's where Mandala Retreat Center is, and I'm now the director again.
Yes, thank you, Mel. Thank you, Katie. Really happy to be here today. And as you said, I'm a teacher, or really a teacher in training, as we all always are with Tara Mandala. And I am part of the Magyu, or mother lineage, at Tara Mandala. I've been in that program for a long time. I'm a Kalyana Mitra and mentor in that program, and a Feeding Your Demons facilitator. Maybe we'll talk more about Feeding Your Demons later. I work one-on-one with individuals using that and other techniques, and co-director of the Mandala method at Tara Mandala, which we're very excited about, bringing the Mandala teachings in a more accessible way to a wider audience. And really my path, it's very personal. I came to Lama Sultram when I was seeking more feminine leaders within Buddhism and really seeking that. And that's what I found, and guidance around having young children. And it became the foundation for my personal path. I had studied in another lineage before that, and this really transformed my life in a new way.
Thank you, both of you. Yeah, I that's one thing about Lama Tsultrim is that she offers a lot. Well, she's one of the few places where one can really grow to appreciate, probably the the leading one, certainly in the West anyway, where one can appreciate the feminine side of Buddhism. I happen to have been born a man, but I have a lot of the feminine in me, and I, when I found her, I went, "Wow, this is a tremendous opening, I think, for many of us in the West. And as was the case with Lisa, it gives many women a place to be comfortable. You know, I've met so many women who are devoutly Buddhist, but still uncomfortable with the patriarchy. And I think Lama Tsultrim's teachings are a great help to those people and to all of us. Now, what really, though, well, I should go step back a little bit in that I'm always looking for ways to make Buddhism more accessible to us in the West. I think we in the West really need another religious tradition of some sort. And I think, you know, a kind of modernized Buddhism could be that for tons of us. And what I find remarkable about Tara Mandala is most especially the social networking, this social media site called Yana, which has, let's see, I made a note here so I wouldn't screw this up, which has 3,400 members and receives 4,300 weekly contributions. I think that's an enormous statistic for a Buddhist social networking site. Katie, would you like to start off, and Lisa, join in whenever you'd like about the Yana, how it started, what its aims are, and how it operates?
Sure. Thanks, Mel. Well, the word Yana is really interesting in that in the Buddhist context, it's kind of the spiritual journey, and the Sanskrit terminology is it's a vehicle that can carry one towards enlightenment. And so it really is this place, a virtual place, that has really become something very living and really emblematic of, I think, the feminine that you were talking about. It's very open, it's very real, you know, in this kind of world where digital spaces often feel disconnected. Yana is a counterpoint. It's about showing up for one another. And it's a place where Tara Mandala has been able to, um, it's not so much breaking barriers, but it's building bridges across time zones, across generations, across different levels of practitioners. There's practice sessions that happen every day. And what's wonderful is the time gets converted to your time zone, so it's really easy. There's quotes every day. There are deep practice groups that really are really studying a path, and so they can have really different kinds of discussions. And it's amazing how it was kind of an experiment to start with. We weren't really sure what we were doing or how we were going to do it, but really it evolved around this living question, which is how to hold a tradition while evolving it for the present and the future. And many of our kind of arisings are coming out of Sangha members or global practice leaders, where we now have an aging, illness, and dying group that meets. We have a poetry space. And so as we hear, and I think one of the reasons there are so many people and there is so much participation is because its foundation came out of deep listening, asking questions, what the Sangha wanted, and listening. And I think that's really part of the feminine. You listen and you want to respond, you want to help, you want to, you know, throw open the cupboards and say, of course, we have, lots of food. What do you need? And I think it can be really overwhelming because we do have so much, and we have really tried to kind of understand like what is really meaningful for people, and how do we share the Dharma that makes a difference in every everyday lives, in our families, in our communities. And so, yes, we have Yana to do that.
Well put. Let me ask you one question that I've had recently, and I had a question from one of my subscribers, and in answering it, I wished I knew the answer to this, but does one need to enroll in some, as I understand it, or as it happened with me, by enrolling in a Taramandala course, I was automatically made part of the Yana, or I had the right to become a member of the Yana, and that remains with me afterwards. Does one need to enroll in some course in order to participate in the Yana?
That's a great question. And that really speaks to one of the ways we have developed Yana, which is to hold our courses, because we are able to have small group sessions and post resources and question and answer groups. And that has, we've really shifted a lot of our teachings and courses to being held in that platform. And Yana is really just an open space. There is this, you can just walk into it and look around, um, see what's there. You don't have to be part of a course. It's a place that we've started hosting some of our courses. And Yana is, it's great. It was really built by this wonderful woman in Poland, Dreamy. She couldn't be here today. She had a cold. And um, it was really her heart and her innovation. She posted every single day for years, just sharing quotes and engaging people. And then it happened one day where she couldn't post, and it continued to post without her. People really were just showing up. I have a friend who, she's in the poetry group, and she says, oh, I wake up every morning and I go to Yana because really these are the only people that get my Dharma poetry. When I speak about emptiness, or in a different context, people aren't understanding. And so what it is there's a shared either curiosity for the teachings, or an understanding of certain thoughts. And that, I think, is great. I know when there was um, some recent turmoil in our country around the election, and people were just kind of like disoriented, what I heard was that there were some people who shared to me that, well, when that happened, I went to Yana and I found refuge. It was a group of practitioners. And so the conversation was totally different. And so, yes, Yana is open to everyone. We do have guidelines, though. You kind of can't go on there and be a jerk. It's about right speech and right action. So, yes, but open to anyone.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people from my local Sangha who don't take courses that often with Taramanda. They do it once in a while, but they really joined Yana to be able to join the practices that are listed there. And maybe the ones we're doing here locally don't fit with their schedule, and they'll end up doing Dakini Mandala with the German Sangha, right? Or the Florida Sangha, because it works better. That's the amazing thing, that you can find this spiritual community, right? One of the three jewels, Sangha. Really, that's what Yana represents, this whole other level of spiritual community.
Thank you for that, and especially Katie, for mentioning Dream A, who was going to be here and has the flu. But I am in awe of her energy and what she puts into that sight. I'm glad I'm glad it can go on without her, but she almost feels like the backbone of it. Um, Lisa, I want to talk a little bit about Lama Tsoltran's Feeding Your Demons and the program. You'll explain it better than I will, but it's an adaptation of, it's a manifestation of the Chode process and Lama Tsultran's being in the Chode process and being an emanation of, I'm forgetting her name, but Lisa will remember it.
Machig, Machig.
Machik, yeah. So anyway, Lisa, oh, and also about the program, its philosophy and how one would go about learning it or participating in it, in the program.
Yeah. Well, so as you mentioned, Feeding Your Demons is really inspired, created by Lama, but inspired, drawn from Chud teachings of Machig Labdrön, 11th century Tibetan yogini, and really based in this principle of feeding, not fighting, with ourselves, really, with parts of ourselves, the things that we experience, anger, anxiety, depression, that we label as suffering or we experience as suffering, our tendency is to want to fight those. Go away, go away, go away. How do we overcome them? Get rid of them. We talk in those terms, battling cancer, all of these kinds of things. And how do we change that? How do we turn and look? It's a tool really for looking and meeting these parts of ourselves with compassion, finding out what does this part of us want, need, and how will it feel when it gets what it needs. These are the three questions that are built right into this process. And it's a practice you can do solo. You can also do it guided with a facilitator. And it's really a process that, it's secular in the sense that you don't have to learn Buddhist teachings to benefit from this process. It's really bridging Western psychotherapeutic principles with Buddhist teachings. So, Feeding Your Demons, we teach it as a personal transformation practice. Lopan Peter and Lopan Charlotta Rotterdam really lead that program. And Kapala 1, it's called, or Feeding Your Demons 1, where you learn this process for yourself and how to work with it in terms of your own personal transformation. And then for those interested, you can pursue certification where you could learn to work with others on it. So that's really kind of the overview of the whole process. So it's been a big part of my path within the Magyu lineage. You really do hundreds probably of feeding your demons on your own obscurations or encumberments, but then also as a healer, I utilize it in counseling sessions with other individuals. I work a lot with sexual trauma survivors. I work a lot with stress, individuals experiencing stress. So it's a way to meet a lot of different types of suffering and transform it.
I know there are a lot of Western practitioners who adapt it or portions of it in their practice, and I'm impressed with Lama Tsultran's opening pathways for people who don't want to know about Buddhism or don't want to learn more about Buddhism, and people who are following a Buddhist path. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and Lama Tsultran's openness toward everybody to benefit from the Dharma?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really about trying to relieve suffering, right? That is that motivation that brings us all here. And I think it's the driver behind what Lama does, right? That's her heart. So something like Feeding Your Demons, it's a way of making it more accessible. These skillful means, right? We have this phrase in Buddhism, skillful means. And individuals can benefit from the skillful means that are grounded in thousands of years of Buddhist teachings without adopting all and taking refuge, becoming a Buddhist practitioner. So something like feeding your demons is the perfect example of that. Really, thousands of individuals have benefited from this process of meeting parts of themselves with compassion and then receiving wisdom, because the second part of feeding your demons is an ally where you're really embodying that and receiving wisdom. And you could say you're receiving wisdom from a part of yourself. You can view it as coming from outside of you. It doesn't really matter. It's a way of tapping into that wisdom around this suffering that you're experiencing as a demon. Yeah. And Katie's also a powerful practitioner, so I hope you'll chime in whenever you want to give your own perspective, Katie.
Thank you for that. I had that moment where I was like, I've been doing this for like 20 years. Really? I'm that old? And I was so grateful to meet the Dharma in my 20s. I grew up in Key West. It's kind of a party town, and it was the Mandala method that I stumbled across that really helped me to meet my mind as a 26-year-old and look at some of my habitual patterns, and I'm in a completely different path now. And I've done feeding your demons. It's really powerful for me. I found like, oh wow, oof, like it just kind of um, didn't take a long time. I wasn't in a lot of sessions, and I was able to resolve something quickly and look at my own mind and my own obscurations in that process. So it's amazing. And feeding your demons actually has its own version of Yana, its own network. It was just launched in February. February is Feeding Not Fighting Month, and it has over 1,000 people on it. Within a month, we just launched it, and so there are free guided sessions there, and question and answers, and support for the certification process. And so that's really interesting as well as we'll see what kind of comes with that beautiful space.
Yeah, I think that is, and of course, Lama Tsolchen wrote a book with that title, right? Feeding Your Demons. Yeah, and there's more to the title, but easy enough to find. Lama Tsolchen Alioni, Feeding Your Demons. Yeah, I think that has become something that's reasonably well known, and at least among a certain Western community, as a really helpful self-improvement method. Where do you think, and this could be either one of you or both, but where do you think one should start if one doesn't know much yet about Lama Tsolchen or Tara Mandala? Of course, there's the website, easy enough to find. It is so vast that it can be confusing until you have some patience and navigate it. Similarly with the Yama, it is gigantic with stuff always happening, and can be confusing. What would be a good starting point for somebody?
That's a great question. I think that the answer is you start where you are, right? And with Yana, we do have an introductory video that Dreame put together. And Dreame, I was just recently talking to her. I said, I think you are the architect and the artist of this space. And so it's great. You can just go there and kind of get a nice tour or introduction to Yana. And our website, if you go to our website, at the very top, it says network, and you can just click on it and you'll be in Yana, or, kind of get introduced there. And so it's great to read a book. It's great to find a course. We have all different kinds of courses. Like Lisa mentioned, some are, they go over years and years, full paths, full traditional lineages are held at Tara Mandala, and some are just a weekend or a film screening. So, you can really just find what resonates with you and, yeah, start where you are.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. People come into Tara Mandala in so many different ways. Often they're drawn to a particular retreat or practice, and you just have to kind of trust that, right? Someone will have read about Chud, which is a complicated practice to do. And yet I've known people that that was their first retreat. There was just this resonance and it spoke to them, and they really devoted themselves to learning it. And of course, we have retreats that are more accessible than that. The empowered feminine, we have the Dakini Mandala, or journey into the empowered feminine. That is a starting point retreat. Feeding your demons is a starting point retreat. This beautiful year-long program that you're in, Heart of Buddhism, is such a wonderful offering for starting, right? And I think even now someone could start in the second module and do the recordings from the first one. So that's just an amazing offering for someone who really wants to get grounded in both the history and practice. So yeah, I think that's one of the compelling things about Tara Mandala is there are many skillful means, and so you can follow what resonates for you.
Regarding that Heart of Buddhism program, it's a year-long program in 5 sections. And I've been pretty thoroughly in Buddhism for, well, not for the whole 40 years, but, for a lot of 40 years. And I never tire of relearning the basics if they're skillfully presented. And the first of the 5 programs, which I've now completed, is very basic from my perspective, but also very broadening to hear a very skillful, well, both Lama Tsultrim and very skillful academic present it again from their perspectives, including a portion of the feminine aspects that often get overlooked in the stories about early Buddhism. Chud, I should mention for anyone who's not familiar with the term, literally means cutting through. And it refers to cutting through, well, feeding your demons deals with cutting through, but also feeding those parts of you that need feeding. But Chud classically just refers to cutting through your attachments to ego, attachment to stuff. And Maciej Lobdon, sorry, I blanked on the name earlier, but Maciej brought that to Tibet. I mean, it was a tradition that sort of existed before, but she solidified it into a Tibetan, one or more Tibetan lineages. That flourish today, and part of it is facing what you fear. So part of her practice was going to places where they keep dead bodies and things like that, which not terribly practical anymore, but I have practiced it in my daily life sometimes when I say, oh, I'm afraid of doing that, so I'm going to do it. There are times in your life when that chud, the little chud voice in me. I originally learned chud from another teacher, Anand Tupton, but there are times when that chud voice in me says, "Oh, you fear it? That means you should do it." Now, obviously, that's not all the time. Doesn't mean you have to go to the dentist for a root canal if you don't need one. But yes, I think even that, just that part of it, without the whole feeding your demons aspect, is useful Buddhist practice. Would either of you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, the phrase I often hear Lama use is self-clinging, cutting through self-clinging. And we talk in terms of the root of suffering, right? That's sort of the root. Sometimes it's translated as ego in the West, and we kind of have moved away from that word. We use self-clinging a lot at Terra Mandala because we do want a functional, healthy ego in Western psychotherapeutic terms. So we're not trying to destroy that, right? But it's identifying only with that. And that is the root of suffering. Everything else we feel is sort of built on top of that. If we feel hurt by someone and then we lash out as anger, so we're experiencing that anger maybe as the demon, or in the mandala, 5 families, that's the obscured emotion, Vajra family emotion, the obscuration of anger, right? How do we work with that personally? If we can unhook the self-clinging underneath that, the self-protective mechanism that's making us lash out because we're actually hurt, if we can actually work to unhook that, cut through that, what's revealed is a clarity about the situation, right? Their role, my role. We call that in the mandala mirror-like wisdom, right? So that is what's revealed. So this is kind of how we're working through these skillful means with the actual emotions that are arising. Those emotions are all emanating from that root of self-clinging. And when we feel fear, fear is trying to protect that. Fear is like afraid of, fear is that self feels threatened in some way. So it underlies everything that we're feeling. So that's why facing fear, cutting through fear is like the heart. It's underneath working with all of the kinds of suffering that we experience, emanating from self-clinging. I feel like I can't say that as eloquently as Lama, but hopefully, Katie, what do you think from your experience?
I think that's a really wonderful, it's very practical. And I loved, Mel, what you're saying about kind of the chud voice, and that having that courage or having that tool to face that fear, they kind of go together. And then when there is that liberation or that transformation or whatever we experience, we kind of need all three to get to that. We need the fear, we need the courage, we need the practice, and then it's something that changes us forever, right? We're like somehow stronger, or we know ourselves better, or we know the world better. And so it's it the kind of hashtag, right? It's like go to the places that scare you, like inside yourself or the world. And so it was funny. We were kind of playing with like different little phrases, and Lama Tsultrim has a really beautiful one right now. Meditation is activism. It's really powerful because you do change yourself. So you do change your immediate world, and then the ripple effect, right? It's the ripple effect. And that we were kind of saying, okay, what about go to the places that scare you? Tar Mandala. Right? Oh no, that's not going to work because Tar Mandala is so beautiful. It's like a pure land, but that there are these blessing streams that are alive, these lineages that are being held. We have translations happening of ancient texts. People sponsor translations. We have a library. We have the temple is really so beautiful. When lamas from Himalayan countries come and visit, they look around, the land, the snow-capped peaks, the views forever. And there is this transmission that happens from meeting the land, meeting the lama, meeting the teachings, that, yeah, it's priceless.
I know that both of you have some limitations on your time, but one of the things that Lisa said a minute ago raises what I think is a really important, just practical mindset issue. Buddhism, non-Buddhism, Tara Mandala, anywhere. And I'd like to throw that out with an anecdote that I've used. This is something that, well, you'll hear. I've used it in my blog, and it's part of a book that I'm finishing up that will come out. And it deals with that subject of, I feel like I let go of my ego some years ago. And yet, if I didn't have some ego, what would motivate me to do this podcast or to write a book or to write a blog? And I was struggling with that issue maybe 10 years ago, sometime back. And there was a woman I know who, well, I know her just because I see her. We go to the same retreat, or we did for a while go to the same retreat regularly with our teacher. And I learned as I got to know this woman and more about her that she's a law professor who specializes in Haitian and international issues and teaches students for 6 months a year in San Francisco and then takes them for 6 months to Haiti. So she's back and forth between Haiti and San Francisco, and that's her regular routine. And so one day after one of the retreats, when we were out of the noble silence and we could talk, and I said to her, I said, I'm struggling with this idea of ego, and I would like to teach, but how much of that is ego and how much is. And she said, "Oh, if it weren't for ego, I'd never get on a plane." How would either of you like to pick up on that?
Yeah, it's a very rich question, right? I think what immediately comes to mind is motivation, or in Mahayana Buddhism, we're cultivating bodhicitta, right? This pure motivation that we're practicing not only for ourselves, but to benefit all beings, and that practicing for ourselves is benefiting other beings through interdependence. This phrase Katie just spoke about, meditation is activism. That's why meditation is activism, right? Because so you liberate yourself from your own kind of self-protective mechanisms that impacts everyone around you and ripples out. So I feel like that's the whole path. The whole path is like transforming from being self-protective to motivated through bodhicitta. And then maybe we're talking about ego in a different sense as that occurs. Your ego is now a container. So your psyche, your way of functioning in the world, we need that still to function as a person, but it is in service to something else. It's not just about trying to get what you want or protect yourself. It's in service to something that's connected to everyone around you. So I think it's just a matter of how you use that word ego. We tend to think of it as only being self-serving, but through Buddhist practice, it comes to be in service to something else, is kind of how I would answer that. How about you, Katie?
Oh, the ego. Well, I think when you meet your mind, you meet your ego, because we're just driven so much by just our egoic tendencies or our egoic reactions. And so it's a bit of a dance. And I've really appreciated kind of getting to recognize, like, oh, you're doing that again. Or like watching the display, right? In Buddhism, it's all just the display arising. And when I understand that, then there's a freedom I'm not controlled by my ego. It doesn't have a power over me in the way that it probably, could. And so I think that's the beauty of the teachings, is that, like the Buddha said, you have to be a lamp unto yourself, right? Like you have to do this work, you know. There's no one else that can do it for you. It's not like a tap on the head and you're enlightened. And um, that I think is really empowering. So I think that's what I would say about ego.
Well, and just to add on to that, I think what that really brought to mind is something that really was so important to me when I first came to Buddhism, that we're asked to practice for ourselves, to test the teachings and to experience it for ourselves. It's not really a faith-based tradition in the sense of just believe this. You meditate and watch your own mind and discover, well, is there anything permanent, right? Can I find anything permanent? Is the teaching on impermanence true? And you're asked to discover that for yourself, not just subscribe to it as a belief. That's really the essence of Buddhism, is discover it for yourself, realize it for yourself. Here are skillful means to do so. So I think that's what really resonated for me. I think I have a bit of a rebellion streak. So I didn't necessarily want to just subscribe to what someone else was telling me. I want to test it and experience it.
I mentioned, I think, I forget whether it was, oh, yeah, I think it was just to you two earlier, that I have cognitive issues where I often forget a name that I should know very well. One of those names that I'm forgetting right now is a famous Tibetan Buddhist teacher who translates for the Dalai Lama whenever he comes to the United States, and I'm blanking on his name. But I had the opportunity, and I was taking a course with him, and it had to do with cutting attachment to ego, and I had the opportunity to ask him, well, if it wasn't for ego, would you be doing all those translations? And his answer was, oh, well, it's a semantic thing. What you see as ego. Bodhicitta requires tremendous courage, and you need a sense of self uh, to carry that out. So if you mean by ego what supports a sense of self, that's healthy. It's the ego that is clinging, that or it's the ego that you're clinging to or that encourages you to cling. That's the problem. And I thought that was a good answer. I also think that maybe this is a good opportunity to wrap up, unless either of you has anything to add.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Mel, for inviting us to this time together today. And I'd like to thank Lama Soltram. She's in retreat right now. She really encourages everyone to take retreat, have a moment with yourself, look at everything. It's where it all happens. And if it wasn't for her courage and her luminary vision and her open heart, we wouldn't have these teachings that are so accessible and profoundly impactful. So gratitude for that and this time together today.
Yes, I echo that absolutely. Thank you, Mel, for inviting us and for sharing the teachings in this way. It is a gift to others, and to Lama Tsultrim, our guide, that she is had the courage really to create all of this.
Well, thank you both so much. I feel honored that you've joined me for this, and I think we've created a good 45 minutes or whatever it's been. And why don't we take a moment in the Tara Mandala tradition and in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, that if we have created any merit here, to dedicate that merit to all beings without exception.